It's the Karen Reed retrial. We'll review the defense's closing arguments as they completely destroyed the Commonwealth's case and invalidated all of our police experts' opinions.
There was no collision.
I agree with all of this.
There can be no doubt that Karen Reed is innocent. We'll break it down moment by moment. All that and what it means for your weekend on the Comm Center. Wake up, America. It's the Comm Center with Drew Breezy. It's a TV show on the internet about two best friends who are called by a small town sheriff to investigate when a strange sound is heard in the station bathroom that sounds like someone politely knocking on the gates of hell. I'm John. I'm an actual 911 dispatcher. I've been doing that in my community for 10 years. You can't beat that experience unless, of course, you got 29 years of experience as a cop. That's Drew Breezy. That's a fake name, but he's an authentic cop. Today, Drew, we're going to just break down Alan Jackson's closing statements. I thought it sounded like the opening statements, only angrier.
Yeah.
But we're just gonna play it, and we're gonna see if the jury that's currently considering the Karen Reed case and her fate is gonna get bamboozled. Let's do it.
There was no collision. There was no collision. There was no collision. This case was corrupted from the start. It was.
I hate to do this already.
We're 3 seconds in. Go for it.
We're 3 seconds and two thoughts in. But he said there's no collision. I just want to point out, and I'll post it for you. I put a poll up on our YouTube page. It was pretty popular. It got a lot of attention. Basically, the poll read, if a guy throws a mannequin in the middle of the road and your loved one is driving, and it causes your loved one to veer off the road and off a cliff, and they meet an untimely death, what should happen to them? Should it be a manslaughter? Should it be a murder? Should it be a mental health evaluation? Or should you just let the family deal with it? And overwhelmingly, people said it was a manslaughter. So when he talks about no collision, no collision, no collision, that may very well be under certain definitions. There's still a lot of questions about how the taillight got broken and because there are taillight pieces found there. You don't need to have a collision for her to be responsible for his death. That's the point. And you'll probably see that in Hank Brennan's closing argument. I know this is controversial with a lot of people. I'm not trying to raise your ire. I'm just stating fact. 68% of the people agreed with me. You throw a mannequin in the road and somebody drives off a cliff and you kill that person, you are responsible for their death. And that's what the Commonwealth is asserting in one of those charges.
I put you would only be responsible for the mannequin's death.
Corrupted by biases and conflicts and personal loyalties that you heard about. And most fatally, it was corrupted by a lead investigator whose misconduct infected every single part of this case from the top to the bottom. On full display, you saw the lengths to which some police officers will go to protect their own at the expense of the rest of us.
Some, because he wants to make sure that you are still in love with the sergeant from Dighton who said exactly what he wanted him to say, which, by the way, was an admission that the taillight was broken. I still don't see why people are looking beyond that. But this is the whole defense strategy is believe no cops, except for the one we got to say what we needed him to say.
Specific ones, right.
At the expense of Karen Reed. We need to understand the very foundation of the entire system of justice in which we operate. Reasonable doubt. This isn't just a technicality and it's not a slogan. It's a constitutional shield that protects the innocent and prevents the government from punishing without proof. The Commonwealth has the high burden to prove every single element of every single charge beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty.
I'll just weigh in here and not do this 100 times because he mentions the reasonable doubt, moral certainty thing. I think he's overselling the reasonable doubt thing because he'll basically say that you have to be 100% convinced, but then he throws in reasonable as a qualifier because that's what the law literally says is reasonable.
Right.
The thing is, and he's about to use the phrase, that's the highest standard in human affairs. Well, the thing is unless you're an eyewitness to this event, there's always going to be some doubt. There's always some possibility that something else happened or some third thing happened. He keeps calling out the jury to have absolutely no doubt at all. But the thing is that's really not what reasonable doubt is. You're always going to have some doubt, but that doesn't mean that some doubt is reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt just means you think she did it, but he has to constantly oversell it to make it seem like it's this wall that you can't climb over.
Do you know who has reasonable doubt? According to every free Karen Reed person I've ever dealt with, Karen Reed has reasonable doubt. She has reasonable doubt that she hit him. She thinks she hit him. I guarantee it. I will play the clip of her father in a minute.
Karen Reed sits here today, presumed innocent. That presumption is not fragile. It doesn't just disappear because there's a charge or a badge or a theory. That presumption stands firm unless and until the Commonwealth clears that high bar, the highest bar the law provides.
I want to be very clear here, too, since we're, 6 minutes in and we've already lost all the Karen Reed people anyway.
We'll never get to the end.
No, we won't. I agree with all of this. You are innocent until proven guilty in all cases, not just this case.
Yeah.
Like in our Hannah Payne episodes, in our in O.J. Simpson, in
Scott Peterson,
in Casey Anthony. You have to get beyond a reasonable doubt before you can get to guilty. But I firmly believe in the system, and I'm accused of bias all the time. I don't really care, but because I know it's in my heart. But
on to reasonable doubt, and to a moral certainty. A moral certainty means a level of confidence so strong, so incredibly unshakable.
He's
that
overselling
you would go home, look your loved ones in the eye, and say, "I am certain." Not probably, not likely. I'm morally certain, and my certainty remains unshakable. The law defines moral certainty as the highest level of certainty known in all human affairs. As we discuss this case, you'll see that the Commonwealth comes nowhere near, nowhere close to reaching that extreme burden of proof. Ladies and gentlemen, on January 28th, 2022, it was a Friday night. John O'Keefe and Karen Reed made plans to meet up with friends, go out for drinks. You saw through video evidence and eyewitnesses that they were affectionate, they were loving, they were in good spirits throughout that evening. But also present at the waterfall that night was Brian Albert's friend, Brian Higgins. We know that he had a romantic design.
I need you to understand that my client is completely innocent of all charges. And she didn't do anything wrong. So look at this Brian Albert, who I just pulled out of thin air, and think about his friend, Brian Higgins. Don't think about my client.
Isn't that what Brennan made the case for during his closing? You're spoiling it.
On Karen, that becomes an incredibly important fact as we discuss the facts of this case. As the bar was closing around midnight, the Alberts invited everybody back to their house. They wanted to keep the night going. But the evidence revealed something interesting, that the invitation to John O'Keefe appears to have been for a different reason. Think about the video of Brian Higgins.
A murdery reason.
Proctor,
okay.
In his investigation, completely and utterly ignored.
He had murder.
Hey, dude, you looking to get murdered? Come on over. We got one murder here for you.
Higgins was agitated after a day of drinking. Agitated that it was John and not Karen, not him. Recall that ominous text that he sent to Karen.
How dare you date your own girlfriend?
With her and John standing just feet away.
That's definitely what he was thinking.
Well, he got no response. And then
so he turned to murder.
So he went to the only logical thing and went straight to murder.
Sparring, practicing, fighting techniques.
By the way, this is fucking around in a bar just for anyone who's never been to a bar or anyone who's never seen anyone fighting.
Or anyone who has ever had a drink with anybody Irish.
This is not serious. This is literally fucking around. Like at one point they're about to hug.
This is exactly why I've been sober for 16 plus years. This right here. I mean,
because you were bad at fucking around.
I mean, no, because my tomfoolery after a few drinks is going to lead people to think that I've set up some kind of training camp for murder.
Higgins' mind. What was he thinking about? And then what happens? Before you look at the next video,
They're just
this next
practicing.
video is
They're just practicing arrests and/or prison antics there.
Right. And then
That's
what
not
happens?
serious sparring. For the love of God, come on.
It's
Just fucking around. Hey, before you do anything else, make sure you're doing all those YouTube things. Hit like, hit subscribe, and there's a good chance that we said something by now that was inaccurate or pissed you off. So go ahead and leave a comment below, and we'll get back to it. Drew?
he sees John kiss Karen on the forehead after he sends that aggressive text to Karen with her standing just feet away.
Wonder what
This is
happened
what
there.
Michael Proctor and his investigation completely ignored. Higgins is very clearly upset. He's agitated. Chris Albert tries to control him. He tries to talk to him, calm him.
This is what I'm saying. Why are we talking about Brian Albert, Chris Albert, and Brian Higgins in the trial for Karen Reed? Because I'll tell you what,
Because the
If-
cops are on trial. The whole system's
Yes.
on trial.
you're out of order. This is called burden shifting. If you're going to blame all of them for this, they should be innocent until proven guilty, first of all. And you should have to swear that you're telling the truth about it. One. Two, how come she gets the presumption of innocence and they don't? They get the presumption of guilt until proven innocent. And three, if this is such a no-brainer, a murder done by a jealous boyfriend, if it were that blatant and that flagrant, don't you think it would be a little bit easier to prove? Am I crazy, John?
Chris forcefully grabs Higgins' arm. You'll see that in the video that you're about to watch. It appears that Chris is trying to calm him down from something. Brian Albert's standing right there with the other two men, but Brian Higgins is having none of it. He appears to be hyper-focused on one person and one person only, John O'Keefe. In an instant, Higgins angrily jerks his arm away from Chris. Higgins rubs his brow, and he directly gestures at John, a gesture that looks a lot like, let's step outside. And John looks at him, takes a swig of beer, completely ignores him. Michael Proctor, the lead investigator in this case, had all this footage, but he did nothing. He had access to the exact same thing that you saw. Why did he do nothing?
Is this the point where he?
Don't even spoil it. You're gonna get your chance.
Okay, I was going to say. I was just wondering if this is where he claims that Brian Higgins turned into a werewolf.
A few minutes later, Higgins then texts John directly. You coming here?
You coming here to get
Question
murdered?
marks. It's now 12:20 a.m. These guys are not good friends. They barely spoke or even acknowledged
each
each other when
other's
they
phone
walked into the
numbers,
bar
though.
together, other than a quick greeting. So why was Higgins
They
coaxing
hugged.
John over to 34 Fairview? You coming here after this?
After
Why
this
not text
fucking
Karen?
around?
Because at that moment, he wasn't interested in Karen. He was interested in John O'Keefe.
Why?
This is about 5 minutes before John gets out of the SUV and walks toward the house. About 5 minutes before Karen sees him alive for the last time. So what happened inside that house, or that basement, or that garage? What evidence was there for the investigators to look into? What did they ignore? Laceration over John's right eyelid, black eyes, a large dog at the home, an obvious dog bite on John O'Keefe's right
Could
arm.
Higgins have
and a head
transformed
injury
into
from falling
Chloe?
backward onto a
That's
hard
what I'm
surface.
saying. He turned into a
Alleged
werewolf. That's
surface.
the only logical
A text
explanation.
from Higgins, one of the last people to ever communicate with John O'Keefe. When John didn't come back outside, Karen, very oblivious to what had happened, thinking she was just left alone in the car out in the cold in the middle of the night, she got frustrated and she drove home. She arrived back at home and her Wi-Fi connected to her car or phone connected to John's Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. She left John voicemail after voicemail after voicemail. He was unresponsive. He didn't pick up a single call. He didn't respond to a single text. The longer he didn't respond, the more upset she got. Her voicemails reflect that frustration. That's the frustration that you hear in her angry voicemails.
She was being a bit of a C-word. You have to admit it.
Right. And he's got to preemptively qualify why she was so nasty on the phone, because he knows it's coming in the closing arguments of the state.
Mm-hmm.
He knows that she was nasty.
She uses harsh words and foul language. She's obviously upset. She's obviously
I believe she called him a fucking pervert
It's not
while
nice.
she was laying next to his child, his niece.
It's not nice.
irritated
It's definitely not the C word.
because he didn't come back out of the house. When he didn't come home at about 5 a.m., Karen went looking for him in a panic. As you know, her worst fears were realized when she found John beaten, battered, bloody, and left in the snow in Brian Albert's front lawn. The screams for help by Karen, the yelling and the hollering, ambulances, emergency lights, fire engines, ladder trucks, paramedics, patrol vehicles, patrol officers, all of them swarming all over the lawn just under Brian Albert's bedroom window. Brian Albert, a sworn peace officer, a first responder trained in being a first responder, never came out of the house.
I will forever question that. I will forever question that. I don't disagree with what he's saying. That is definitely suspect. I can see to a degree, unless he genuinely slept through this. I can see, though, to the degree that you got all this activity outside your house, you're a cop, you're going to want to go outside and see what the fuck's going on your lawn. There isn't any two ways about that.
I don't know. I don't agree because I live where the snow is, and if there's a bad car accident on your corner or whatever, like you might just be like, the cops got this. They don't need me to come out and ask them what's going on. I've seen bad car accidents, and I'm a 911 dispatcher. I have first responder abilities, but like when I see a scene under control with first responders there, I don't assume, well, it's not really secure until I get there.
I see your point, but I also don't feel that we can play both sides of the, well, it's a small town card. Like, I believe that there are a million coincidences in this case, or a million, like, do you know that Judge Cannoni's brother once represented Chris Albert in 1994? Like, yeah, it's a small town. Like, there's only 3 or 4 lawyers there. One of them, you've got a pretty good chance of, and, Judge Cannoni elevated to the judge, like position. It's not her fault, but it's like, oh, well, no, that's a clear sign of corruption and favoritism. No, it's not. It's small town. It's rural America. Everybody knows everybody. And if there was an issue that the judge decided that she needed to recuse herself, she would have recused herself, because she's opening herself up to judicial qualification scrutiny and everything else that goes along with it. So but along with that, John, though, when we say, look, it's small town, we can't, I can't get beyond the cop that lives there, that knows everybody, that knows the entire town, that knows the entire Canton PD, that his brother works for, that, has all this activity swarming on his front lawn, and he doesn't go outside. Now, if he genuinely slept through it, or if he was passed out himself in the basement, different story. And again, innocent until proven guilty, he owes zero explanation to anybody. But it does seem a little, it does go against reason, in my opinion.
I guess, especially since they were out there all day. I mean, the vehicle didn't get towed till 4 p.m. You know that's a little bit more than a fatality accident or a bad accident if they're out there literally for 10 hours.
Yeah. And the other thing is that I think people always neglect is this became a murder in hindsight. So when they were out there collecting evidence or looking at stuff or whatever, they're looking for evidence of a crash. They're looking for evidence of what occurred. They knew that they had a crash victim at the hospital. They're looking for, as Karen said over the phone, John got hit by a plow. They're looking for evidence. They're looking for all kinds of stuff, but all indications were that this was like a traffic fatality, that he was a dark figure in the night and got hit. And it turned into a murder after the grand jury got a hold of it. And now everybody is like, why didn't they treat that like a murder scene? It wasn't a murder scene. It was a crash scene. They are definitely supposed to treat it, especially if it's a death investigation, because of, you know, what the insurance and civil implications are, especially if they don't know who or why the thing, you know, and okay, you got that. You're right. But they're not going to, you can't hold them to the standard of not processing it like a murder scene if they don't know they're dealing with a murder scene. That was de facto. That was not present at the time.
Never went outside to help a fallen fellow officer who was laying on his own property. The lead investigator, Michael
Kieran Reed did the same thing, by the way.
Proctor, for his part, never went into the house. The Commonwealth is struggling.
I wanted, we're never going to get through this. There is not a judge in the land. Like, I can write the probable cause affidavit to get into that house that says all of the things that I hear from testimony. Like, in fact, I'll have Gemini pull all of the sworn testimony. I'll recreate what I would have written as a search warrant, and I will show you that there is no judge alive that's going to give you entrance inside the house if you're conducting a pedestrian accident outside of the house. There is not a judge alive that is going to grant you probable cause to search that residence under the Fourth Amendment. Nobody. They still went inside and talked to the homeowner to see if they knew anything, had any cameras, had any were witness to the event or whatever. That's what they should have done. They did it later in the evening. But there is no judge alive that's going to sign a search warrant for that.
You know who they should have called as an expert witness?
Chloe?
The judge herself. Judge, would you have signed a search warrant on this? And then the judge says objections. And the jury says overruled.
Right. Then Karen's like, I'll allow it.
To try to prove that John O'Keefe ended up in Brian Albert's front lawn because he was struck by a vehicle. They have failed. They cannot and they will not ever be able to prove that John was struck by a vehicle beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty, because the science does not lie, the medical evidence does not lie, the physics do not lie.
Those are hard to overcome. I'm giving them that too. Those are definitely hard to overcome. Something happened, but I realize that you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. She doesn't have to contact him, though. There doesn't have to be a collision. That's my whole point.
Investigation was flawed from the start because their investigator was corrupted from the start. There was no collision. The science, it's an old saying, is known as the silent witness. It doesn't lie, it doesn't forget, and notably, it doesn't take sides. In order for there to be a collision, there has to have been an impact site. The vehicle had to have struck John. Doctor.
You mean an impact site where there's a dead body with a bunch of debris around him and a hat and a shoe and the matching shoes at the hospital on the victim? You mean that kind of? Is that what you mean?
Irini Scortibello, the Commonwealth's medical examiner, someone governed by law to make these decisions. We know that a person struck by a vehicle suffers massive trauma, broken bones, fractures, soft tissue damage, torn ligaments, contusions, soft tissue injury, severe tissue injury, crushing blows. None of that was present with John. Not anywhere on his body, including his right arm. The fact is, the injuries are not from a vehicle impact. Not his head injury, not those scratch and bite wounds. Not a single medical expert called by the defense or called by the Commonwealth has testified that John was hit by a car. Not.
Scratch and bite wounds is a foregone conclusion. Like he has sold that as a foregone conclusion. Scratch and bite wounds. What did you say, John?
I said I'm not sure that that's true. Judson Welcher said to a certain degree of engineering certainty that is what happened. So just you can disagree with Judson Welcher. That's fine, but this is gaslighting if he says no one. I mean, maybe he's saying that no medical person has said that's happened, but it's not that we didn't hear anyone say that.
It's look, the medical personnel, the medical examiner that actually did the autopsy left it undetermined because she was unable to determine.
Well, it's because she doesn't know the circumstances surrounding it, which she can't know because she's not a psychic.
And she does not specifically say, well, I know it's anything but a homicide. She never says that. She says it's undetermined because it's undetermined. Now, she has said, yeah, it's undetermined, but it's definitely an accident or She's not saying that. She's not saying that at all. She's leaving it undetermined because she's unable to determine.
Well, this is the semantics, that it's what got said versus what's being left unsaid. She would have to get up there and specifically say, now my findings don't preclude the possibility of that, but that's her going out on a limb, and it's testifying kind of outside of her borders. Like the prosecutor, the defense really has to get her to kind of step out on that ledge. And as someone who has no idea what happened, you're not going to be willing to want to go out on a ledge. You're just saying, this is what I found and I didn't find anything else. And I'm not going to speculate about what else it could be, because you open that door to speculation, you open your door to endless questioning, and that stuff can be twisted and turned. And you really just want to confine yourself to your answers about what you do know.
Right.
1. Question. You did not include in your autopsy in any fashion any discussion of whether Mr. O'Keefe's injuries were consistent with a motor vehicle accident, did you? Answer. No, I did not. I did not see any evidence of an impact site. That.
Okay. I want to I'm dying to play the father's statement right now.
They just seem to be in a happy place, you know. Yeah.
And spending a lot of time together.
Yes. Yes.
Vacations together.
Yep.
Going out together.
If the relationship had become toxic by January 2022, as prosecutors allege, it's not apparent from this snapshot in time. At C.F. McCarthy's in Canton, they laugh and embrace during a night of heavy drinking. According to police, Karen would back over John and leave him for dead in a snowstorm 2 hours later. Prosecutors say it happened outside the Canton home of another Boston cop named Brian Albert. Karen says she dropped John off there for a get-together.
During your first discussions with Karen, did she believe she may have hit John?
No. She felt she struck something. She struck something. She said, Dad, I think I struck something. I said, what do you mean? Right? This was in the hospital. Right? She says, I remember, all right, backing up and hitting something.
Police find damage to the passenger side taillight of Karen's Lexus LX 570. How the damage occurred is in dispute. The Reeds believe it happened when Karen backed out of John O'Keefe's driveway, hours after police say she hit him. Here's the video.
She backs up to go out and search for John O'Keefe. And that's how that vehicle was damaged.
In court documents, prosecutors say the video only shows Karen coming close to John's car, and no fragments or pieces of a broken taillight were discovered in John's driveway.
Look at it frame by frame. And you tell me whether or not the O'Keefe vehicle, the left rear wheel, does not jetson forward upon impact and return to its previous position.
Police did discover pieces of taillight where O'Keefe was allegedly hit, but the Reeds say it wasn't until after Karen's SUV was in the custody of law enforcement. State police reported towing the Lexus to the Canton police station at 5:30 p.m. Nathan Reed says daylight video from his dad's house shows the car was taken more than an hour before that.
They confiscate Karen's car at my parents' residence in North Dayton at 4:16 p.m. And somewhere in the neighborhood of 5:30, 5:45, Mass State Police CERT team comes back to the scene. They search the scene then with 2 feet of snow, and pieces of a tail lamp are found on top of the snow.
The Reeds also question John's injuries as seen in autopsy photos. They say John appears to have dog bites on his arm. The defense theory is that O'Keefe was beaten inside the Albert home and attacked by the Albert's German Shepherd. Brian Albert's attorney declined to comment.
Our investigators also have found multiple people who have been attacked by the dog. I think John O'Keefe entered that house, was sucker punched, a fight ensued, and he was overwhelmed.
The only problem with that is, John, is his phone does not show that. His phone shows very specifically, and if we're going to go with science, his phone shows very specifically that his phone stopped moving the exact same time Karen Reed stopped reversing.
In and of itself is reasonable doubt. The Commonwealth's case is done. It's cooked. John didn't even have a bruise. Make no mistake, Dr. Scortibello was presented with the Commonwealth's theory of the case, the same case that you've been presented with, and she refused to conclude that John's death was a homicide. And you know who agrees with that? The science, the physics, the data. Dr. Wolf and Dr. Rentschler, they explained they were not initially hired by the defense. They were asked by another agency to conduct their analysis. They looked at the evidence from both sides, not taking a side for the defense or the Commonwealth, completely independent. They looked at the damage to the SUV. They looked at the injuries to John O'Keefe. Both PhDs, both engineers determined there was no collision. The science says it. That SUV's taillight was not damaged by striking an arm, and John was not struck by a 6,000-pound SUV. Dr. Dan Wolf did the testing on the taillight. Actual testing, not some ridiculous blue paint kindergarten project. He did lab testing. He did field testing. He did data testing. In every single test at every single...
This, in like interviews and interrogations, and by the way, in the YouTube comments section, the minute you have to minimize something by making fun of it, you are submitting to its veracity.
You have lost. Yeah.
You've lost.
No, anytime you can't win in an arena of ideas, you have to resort to name calling, whether it's against a person or against a concept. You should just wave the white flag. If you're going to make fun of Drew, if you're going to make fun of a test, it's because you can't defeat it intellectually.
Right. You've got nothing left but to call it a finger painting project.
Speed, the taillight damage was inconsistent with striking an arm. In every test, the taillight damage was inconsistent with damaging the shirt. Remember that severe internal damage to Karen Reed's taillight. Not just the outer lens. The internal diffusers were completely smashed. Any part of that diffuser portion of the taillight is broken. There is no light. Let's take a look at a couple of photos. At 5:07 a.m. at One Meadows, that's the photograph on the left. What do you notice about the right taillight? It's completely illuminated. Later, at 4:12 in the afternoon, photograph on the right, it's lit up. How can that be if the Commonwealth claims that those diffusers, the portion that lights up the light, were already scattered all over 34 Fairview? Dr. Andrew Rentschler, a PhD, a biomechanist, explained that at those speeds, John's arm would be basically destroyed. Bones, broken. But as you know, John's arm was pristine, save those dog and claw bites. He didn't even have a bruise. You can manipulate a taillight fragment. You can't manipulate a bruise. If they claim the car was going fast enough to shatter the taillight and shatter the diffusers, then it was also going fast enough to destroy and shatter John's arm, and it simply did not. So they spent nearly $400,000 of taxpayer money to hire someone to dress up and look like John and paint his arm blue. All
right. Look, I get the $400,000 blah, blah, blah. He calls it $500,000 in a second. Like, it keeps getting inflated, whatever. The only reason they didn't pay ARCA that money, the only reason the defense didn't pay ARCA that money is because the Department of Justice already paid them. Do you think ARCA did that for free, or ARCA did it for the, little tiny sum of $50,000 that, they texted over Signal and whatever it was, and
just the goodness of their hearts. They couldn't let Karen Reed, a person who gives a fuck about Karen Reed, they couldn't stand to let her suffer the injustice of the Commonwealth.
Right. So, Rentschler on the stand, the defender of justice and purveyor of truths, who talked about, I don't know who put those taillights there. And then when he was challenged, like, do you have a theory of somebody else putting the taillights there? No. He got that in. Like, to me, that's an unreliable, that's an unreliable character. Like, you cannot, that's not impartial. That's not an impartial purveyor of truth. That's somebody trying to sway the jury into believing what he believes or he was told to tell them to believe. That goes both ways.
Testing, conversely, also established that it is impossible for John's sweatshirt sleeve to be damaged by an impact with the taillight. The Commonwealth's theory is that the sleeve of John's hoodie sweatshirt was damaged by flying shards of taillight slicing through the shirt and through John's arm. I have 3 questions. John's arm had about 36 abrasions. How did 36 shards of acrylic go through 9 tiny little puncture holes? Number 2, why are there no slices or cuts in the hoodie? All the defects are punctures that you might get from canine teeth. And number 3, if the shards cut bloody gouges into John's arm, why is there no blood, no skin, no tissue on a single shard of taillight? The Commonwealth cannot answer a single one of those questions because John's arm was not impacted by the taillight. It doesn't make sense simply because it didn't happen. Compare and contrast the ARCA experts and their actual testing to Judd Welcher. He told you that for the better part of $500,000, he'd come in and testify that John was tall enough to touch the taillight with his elbow. That's it. And even in that basic demonstration, he had to lean in to manipulate it.
I still have issues with this lean in to manipulate it. There's no camera that is showing where his hand is. And I don't know if this is true or not. I do know that if you're going to be honest about it, you should at least discuss it. And what they're saying is that when the SUV is backing up, that he throws his elbow, but they're not showing the perspective of what the tailgate would do if it hit his hand. And that would cause his elbow to move.
Yeah, I think you're missing the point. This is the point. The jury saw what they saw, and they formed an opinion about it. And now he wants to come in here, and his whole thing is that he's sure he saw manipulation, he saw leaning in. Yeah. And the whole point is to make the jury question, what did I see? Right. Did I see an honest test, or did I see manipulation? So now it's whether or not it's a good test isn't even, it's not, that's not even what's at the matter. It's whether or not deception is at play. So that's his overall theme for everything. Right. Do I know what I know? Do I believe what I believe? Is that what God really said? To quote the old deceiver. And he just wants the jury to question if they've already formed an opinion based off of what Welcher told them. He's just asking you, is that what you saw, or did you see something deceiving? That's all. And it's not even to convince them that they were deceived necessarily. It's to plant a seed of doubt that he knows will grow over the next hour.
Just as an aside, I will give him a 10 out of 10 on his attire.
I'll give him 11 out of 10. Very good looking. I love that mustache, the way it blends into the beard.
He's kind of a Wolverine. Yeah, it's
Wolverine.
Does he have bone claws? It's just a nice suit, very plain blue shirt, dark blue tie, spread collar. Definitely envious. He's well put together. He's definitely going to convince a jury based on, I'm not slighting him. I'm not making fun of him. I'm saying
he knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing. He looks very good.
And he knows appearances are what matters most, and that's what he's playing up the most here.
Exactly.
That he wanted. Dr. Welcher then claimed that the reason he didn't do the actual testing, there isn't enough evidence to determine what happened. What happens when there isn't enough evidence, in his words? You vote not guilty. The Commonwealth also used the same company, Aperture, to try to establish a time of a collision that never occurred. The Commonwealth called Shannon Burgess, the supposed expert. There is a cardinal sin for experts. It's called confirmation bias. It's when you decide to change your opinion to fit a theory.
Wrong. Sorry, but he got the definition wrong. When I was editing, I couldn't let that slide. He says, would you change your opinion to fit a theory? No, that's when you see a theory and you think, well, that theory might be accurate. That's when you change your opinion. That's learning. That's critical thinking. Confirmation bias, per Google, is the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. So literally, if you change your mind, it's not confirmation bias. And I think this was intentional, though, too, because as I said in my last remarks about casting doubt about what you know and what you don't know, this is one of those ways in which lawyers can kind of turn your brain into a pretzel. I remember last year, the year before, I was actually in jury selection. And the defense attorney got up and asks us, anybody here perfect? Anybody here make mistakes? Anyone ever here tell a lie? And of course, we're all forced to, sit there and not, raise our hands accordingly as to what we've done. And about 5 minutes later, he got people believing that you can tell a lie by mistake. Like people were literally falling for this because it's like you take small leaps in logic that eventually, by the time you get from the bottom of the stairs to the top of stairs, you only took small little leaps, make small little concessions along your way. But when you realize, when you get to the end from where you started, he has completely changed your worldview one small step at a time. And it's through little things like this, like confusing you about what confirmation bias is. That if someone changed their idea about what happened based off of a theory that they saw and tested, that's confirmation bias. That's a way of completely recategorizing the scientific method as something deceitful.
This entire trial is an exercise in confirmation bias. Both ways. I'll admit, both ways. But there are more plausible theories when you critically think than when you try to confirm your own bias. And by the way, if I'm a cop and I give an opinion based on my experience, that's not cop bias. That's just my experience.
He's here to tell you his opinion. You know you're getting an opinion when you listen to Drew as well, and you're free to disagree with that opinion and do with what you will. But he's here to give you his opinion too. He's not here to be the arbiter of truth necessarily. The truth is for you as the critical thinker to decide. And if you can't stand hearing someone else's point of view, then you're not a good critical thinker, and you're never going to figure out the truth, because someone else that tells the truth that you like to hear more is going to do your thinking for you.
So if I'm able to critically think and I'm able to apply experience and put it in a video and have you like edit it masterfully and put it out for all the world to see and criticize and do all this other stuff.
I don't get paid, by the way. I want everyone to know that.
Am I showing police bias just because I used to be a cop and I happen to have this knowledge? Or when you say something like, well, you're just protecting the thin blue line and you're gonna protect them at all costs, isn't that a little bit biased? Isn't that like
it's confirmation of an anti-police bias?
Exactly. You don't want to hear what I have to say because I used to do the job. And I've how many times do I have to talk about the airplane? So when the airplane crashes and the pilot gets on TV and explains how the airplane crashed, nobody writes in and says, he's just got pilot bias. It doesn't happen that way. All he's doing is explaining through his experience what likely happened. That's all I'm doing. It's not about being biased and protecting and doing all this other stuff. I'm telling you the facts. I'm telling you what can happen or what might have happened. And if you disagree with them, that's fine. I'm just telling you that I have a few decades under my belt that might sway you a little bit differently. And if it doesn't, I don't care. But don't tell me I'm biased. You're being biased by
You're biased. Let's go on.
We're all biased.
The most important takeaway from Shannon Burgess' testimony was how brazen, how shameless he was in trying to change the data to try to suit the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth has had this case for 3.5 years to get it right. So his top expert, Dr. Welcher, prepares a report. And that report says that John O'Keefe was struck by Karen Reed's SUV at 12:31:38. He was struck, he was immediately incapacitated, he was immediately unconscious. But there was a huge problem with that. They must have realized that the very data they produced unequivocally establishes that they are wrong about a collision. It could not have happened. Why? Because John was interacting with his phone after 12:31:38, immediately incapacitating. How could he be interacting with his phone afterward? He was on his phone, opening his phone, checking his phone, reading texts on his phone, and locking his phone, all of it after 12:31:38, which is the time Welcher clocked for the moment of the impact. He was taking steps and walking with that phone after 12:31:38 also. That's what their own data showed, and it devastated their case. He came up with a brand new story right in the middle of trial. Can you believe, Mr. Burgess? You don't have to look any further than Shannon Burgess's CV to answer that question. That was a shame. Matt DeSogra looked at Burgess's report and told you that in every single scenario, John was alive and walking after they said he was hit, because there was no collision. John O'Keefe was inside, and the phone battery temperature further proves it. He was not laying outside in the cold. He was inside somewhere a little bit warmer. When the iPhone is exposed to freezing temperatures, it will drop from 81 to 21 degrees in 15 minutes.
My Samsung just gets hotter and hotter, just so you know.
On frozen ground. He arrived at 34 Fairview and his phone dropped only 20 degrees over the course of an hour. It stayed steady, never dropping below 50 degrees for the next 4.5 hours, basically through the entire night. Dr. LaPosada confirmed that John O'Keefe did not die of hypothermia because he wasn't outside. Every expert agreed this is how John O'Keefe died. A rearward fall from a standing position. What could make you fall straight back like that? Add a laceration to the right eye consistent with a fist or a punch, and you've got your answer. He certainly didn't sustain that wound on the back of his head by falling backwards onto a lawn. It could only be produced by hitting a hard, ridged, or ledged surface, like a concrete stair. What's just through that garage door? Michael Proctor never stepped down in that garage to find out. These are dog bites. Not one witness actually disputes that John O'Keefe's arm injuries are from a dog. Uncontested, undisputed. There is no evidence that John was hit by a car. The reason we're here is because the system has failed badly. I want to talk about the utter failure of the police to investigate this properly. Michael Proctor, the lead investigator for the Commonwealth, did nothing to actually and properly investigate this case. Let's start with the house. Brian Albert's house, where John's body was discovered lifeless, and no one secures the scene. No tape, no preservation of evidence, no crime scene log, no search warrants, no consent searches, no photographs of the house interior. They didn't treat the house as a crime scene, and shamefully, they didn't even treat the yard as a crime scene. The lame excuse offered by retired Lieutenant Gallagher, it was really cold and windy, and I didn't know if there was a crime that had been committed.
That's not a lame excuse. That's the truth. It was, I mean, he's saying it like, like Lieutenant Gallagher was whining because he has to. Like, he can't say it truthfully how Lieutenant Gallagher actually said it. But it was really cold and windy, and we did not know we were investigating a crime.
Here's the thing, too, that you're totally absent from his discussion and from the jury's point of view. Police officers sometimes do find people, particularly after a blizzard, who were pedestrians, who were hit and killed.
Mm-hmm.
And that just happens. That doesn't necessarily indicate that there was a murder. Obviously, it might indicate that there was a manslaughter, but it doesn't. But finding somebody dead on the side of the road is not. It's especially inside of a police officer's experience. Someone who's going to make lieutenant, you're going to come across a car versus pedestrian fatality at some point in your career, and you're not actually going to think, well, this is obviously a huge conspiracy. You're going to think someone got hit by a car and someone drove away, and there's not much to the scene other than what's going on with the body and debris.
Especially when the person on the scene who is yelling, who is driving the car, who last saw him alive, is yelling, "I hit him, I hit him, I hit him." Or even if she's saying, "Did I hit him? Did I hit him? Did I hit him?" I'm so tired of people saying, "Oh, any normal person would say that." Okay, yeah, fine. Any normal person might question themselves. Okay. I have also heard any normal person confess to a crime, and I'm not going to dismiss that as a confession just because Dr. LaPosada says, or Dr. Russell or somebody says, no, that's how people act when they're in grief. They act that way when they're in grief, yes, but they also confess to crimes when they're in grief. They do it all the time. It's called an excited utterance. There's a legal term for it. Like, we've heard it before, we've seen it before, and John, you being a 911 dispatcher, somebody who takes these calls as people are...
I have to remind people, like, you're on a recorded line. Shut up, dude. You just blew your whole defense.
You have the right to remain silent.
Would you please be silent on this phone? You have the right.
People utter things when they're excited. It's called excited utterance. Sometimes it's a confession to a crime. Sometimes it's questioning yourself in grief. You can't.
Sometimes it's setting up premeditation when they're on the phone with me. If you guys don't make him turn off his radio, I'm gonna go over there and get him. I'm like, okay, well, you're cooked, buddy.
Yeah, you're gonna regret saying that at some point.
Yeah.
You didn't know that a crime had potentially been committed? You have a man laying dead in the yard, black eyes, consistent with a fight, bloody nose, also consistent with a fight, bleeding from the face, consistent with a physical altercation, a cut over the right eye, consistent with a punch.
Contra coup.
No coat in the freezing cold, not dressed for outside, dressed for inside, and one shoe on. I wonder where the other shoe could be. I don't know, maybe in the house 30 feet away. Broken.
Turns out it was on the victim who was in the hospital because he got hit by a car.
And shattered drinking glass next to him, the type of glass that you might find in a kitchen in a house. And John's phone was tucked neatly under his back shoulder. The neighbor across the street, Detective Lieutenant Kelleher, had a ring camera pointed at the exact direction where John O'Keefe would have been hit, and nobody bothered to secure it.
Right, but that video would have shown.
It would have shown whatever it was shown both ways. It might have shown exonerating evidence, and we don't have it.
It would have shown Chloe dragging John O'Keefe by the arm.
Yeah, why didn't it show the Alberts or whoever dumping them outside or whatever it was shown?
So let's call a spade on that one. I mean,
of course, this was a potential crime scene. This was Brian Albert's house, and that comes with privileges. Is the homeowner going to catch any shit? Nope. He's a Boston cop too.
Now let's reframe that little the famous text message. Is the homeowner going to catch any shit? Nope. He's a Boston cop too. It's not like,
it might be an Oxford comma thing. No, he's not going to catch any shit. Oh, by the way, he's also a Boston cop.
Yeah, you can use the word too as an also. It goes both ways. Look, I see why that looks horrible. I definitely see why that lends to bias. I see why they would bring that up in trial. I see why that would be problematic for the homicide investigator to be texting. I get all that. But there are two definitions of what he's saying. He's only giving you one of them because he doesn't want his client to have to take responsibility for anything.
Well, I would say if that's, and it's moot to bring this up, but it's like if that's the case you wanted to make, the prosecutor maybe should have put him on the stand to make that point.
Proctor wrote those words just hours after John's body was found. You weren't given the opportunity to hear from Michael Proctor, but you can read his thoughts for yourself. Quote, all the powers that be.
You weren't given the opportunity makes it sound like the state never called him, but they never
We're
called
going
him
to get into this.
I'm sorry.
One answers ASAP. I assume you guys are out to make it cut and dry since it involves cops. Something stinks. And Proctor responds, yeah, but there will be some serious charges brought on the girl. Hours into this investigation, there will be some serious charges. She's a whack job. Yeah, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass. No ass bitch. She's got a leaky balloon knot. Leaks poo. Zero chance she skates. She's fucked. And up to this point, Michael Proctor had done zero investigation, save talk to a grand total of 3 people, all of whom were named Albert.
So he's done zero investigations, save being at the hospital, looking at the victim, determining their stuff in his clothing.
He didn't do anything except some.
And conducted 3 interviews of the person at the house that I just told you that he didn't go to, and bullshit.
Or McCabe. Late night, sitting at his office, rifling through Karen's phone, bragging about looking for naked pictures of her. That text wasn't sent to his buddies or his friends. That text was sent to his supervisors at the Massachusetts State Police, for God's sake. And what was their response? Sergeant Buchanan liked this conduct with a big old thumbs up.
How big was the thumbs up?
I don't have
is it any bigger than any other? Like, this is what I'm saying. The sensationalizing. He doesn't need to sensationalize that. Sergeant Buchanan liked that. That is a way that people
just respond to text without responding to it. Is just double.
Right. He does, like, he could say, his immediate supervisor, Sergeant Buchanan, never said, "Hey, chill out, stop."
You know what he could have? What is he supposed to say? Like, that was inappropriate. Come to my office right now. It could have been that he. It could have been that he even did address it with him later. Like, you should not be saying that to me.
The lieutenant did.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. Is you kind of consider him like, do you realize that sending that to me in a text message when that's discoverable in this process is maybe a bad idea? But the lieutenant's not going to reply to that in the text message saying, hey, just in case the lawyers get their hands on this later, that would look really stupid, Michael.
Be easier for the
He
search.
basically just says, stop having this conversation. We're going to talk about this in person.
Yeah, and also, like, the texts were dumb. It was a bad move. It showed potential bias, whether it meant to be or not. But the thumb of Yuri Buchanan, which apparently was this big, everyone else's thumb emoji is only this big, but so there were two independent thoughts in that sentence. What if he's not giving the thumbs up to the nudes? What if he's giving the thumbs up to, I'm still here looking through the phone? So I get it. It's a horrible, like, he should not have said that. He shouldn't have said it out loud. He shouldn't have been thinking that, but he's an adult man and he does think those things.
And by the way, those pictures do exist in phones. As police officers who have to look through phones, they typically do see. I know about that too, because when I would have to shake down inmate cells, I would find some pretty horrific stuff. That's just part of doing a search, is you're going to get to know someone pretty intimately, pretty quickly, especially in the era of digital photography. It's probably not at all uncommon that police officers are coming across this thing. I mean, if you don't believe me, ask your local school resource officer what they find.
Yeah, but nobody believes the cops. And Alan Jackson, clutching his pearls here. I'm sure after representing Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey, he's seen some pretty racy things on the phone.
Investigator is supposed to be objective. Michael Proctor went far beyond just insulting Karen Reed. He dehumanized this woman. He betrayed her as a human being. He was fired for this blatant bias. If the Massachusetts State Police can't trust him, how can you trust him with this investigation and with your verdict and with Karen Reed's life? The lead investigator in a murder trial was never called to testify. Think about that. That should stop you in your tracks. Wouldn't you?
Okay, but you could have called him. That's the thing, is that, and I speculated that they wouldn't call him very early on, Dread. I don't know if you remember this. Some people don't watch our other episodes. They just get mad. But I speculated that it might be more worthwhile to the defense to set up Michael Proctor as this specter, as this person who loomed over the investigation, who was whatever bad imaginary thing that the defense could paint him out to be. Whatever bad thing is what Michael Proctor is. We can say whatever he is. And he never gets a chance to come up on the stand and just kind of look like an idiot, kind of maybe half bad cop, half whatever, like ultimately a human being, someone that you're capable of empathizing with.
Right.
The prosecution didn't pull him up because it was a bad idea, but the defense didn't pull him up either. And to your point, Drew, you said last week, if Michael Proctor is such a bad guy, if he dehumanized Karen Reed so much, if he tainted this entire investigation from the get-go, if he was completely corrupt, completely morally bankrupt, and if the jury has to make a decision based off of what Michael Proctor decided happened in this case, then why not pull him up on the stand? Because then you can directly examine him, say, what happened here? Why didn't you do this? Why was your investigation so bad? And then if he tells you the truth, then you know the answer. And if he lies, you can get him on perjury. But they realized it was better to just have this boogeyman that the jury never gets to meet, this mysterious Michael Proctor, this guy in the corner, this guy in the shadows, this guy who was the string puller. He even describes him later as sort of a puppet master figure. It's not Brian Albert Sr. who's the puppet master. It becomes Michael Proctor as the puppet master in all this. And it was just easier to never even bother to pursue that avenue of investigation, especially since now he could say, well, you never got to meet Michael Proctor because of the prosecution. They didn't want the truth to come out. Never mind the fact that the defense calls a police officer of their own later, proving that they could have called Michael Proctor. Drew.
He calls him cancer. And I don't know. I just look, I've lost a few people to cancer in my life. I don't wish that on anybody. I and I'm not going to get all self-righteous and clutch my own pearls here, but that dehumanizes just about anybody when you call them a cancer, first of all, and second of all, like, I get it. I understand.
He's also about to call him radioactive, which I think is really dehumanizing to a lot of hardworking superheroes out there. Radioactive Man, Spider-Man, the Incredible Hulk. A lot of people have been irradiated, and they went on to socially constructive violence.
Homer Simpson.
Yeah, he's been irradiated.
Want to hear from the lead investigator in the case? Don't you have questions? The Commonwealth did not present their own lead investigator to the jury, the very jury who is charged with judging the investigation. Michael Proctor clearly is radioactive. Michael Proctor is no longer a Massachusetts State Police officer. He wasn't transferred. He didn't go on sabbatical. He didn't retire. He didn't resign. He was fired.
Yeah, they took care of the problem. They literally fired him. They took him out. They cut out the cancer, as you called him.
He was terminated for cause. The Massachusetts State Police investigated him, found him guilty of dishonorable conduct, not just for those text messages, folks, for sharing confidential information with witnesses, and for bias. Not just any bias, bias in this case. Fired. This is the man who touched every single piece of important evidence in this case. Mr. Brennan and the Commonwealth, I think, have pinned their hopes, pieces of plastic, that were claimed to have been scraped from the hoodie several months after the fact. What he failed to ask every single witness is who had access to that shirt and who had access to those taillight fragments, and the answer is it was Michael Proctor. For months unaccounted for, before they were submitted to the crime lab. Just go look at the chain of custody documents. You've got them. Why didn't Michael Proctor give those clothes to Maureen Hartnett with the crime lab when she was at Canton PD just days after the fact to receive those solo cups? Why wait until March to book those into evidence? That SUV never hit John. The hair found on the bumper, that magic little hair on the SUV, supposedly survived a 37-mile drive in 47-mile-an-hour winds. But that little magic hair just clung there. But that hair is supposed to have hung on in a 37-mile drive in a blizzard? The only thing that hair proves that the Commonwealth is embarrassingly grasping at straws. The glass on the bumper didn't match the cocktail glass. Michael Proctor, without any other person with him, claims to have found a single piece of glass at the scene. Glass on the bumper, one piece did match one other thing. The Proctor glass. That glass had to be placed there. What about the Ford Edge and that snowplow driver, Brian Loughran, parked outside Brian Albert's house at 3:30 a.m.? That vehicle was moved directly in front of where John's body was found sometime between 2:30 and 3:30 in the morning. The only person connected to a car of that make and model, Brian Albert. Michael Proctor did nothing to investigate that point. Michael Proctor failed to interview obvious witnesses in this case. Why? Why didn't he want to speak to the snowplow driver, Brian Loughran? Why did he falsely claim that no one plowed the roadway that morning? Why did he wait so long to interview Heather Maxson and Ryan Nagel? Individuals who were literally outside 34 Fairview at the exact same time John and Karen arrived at Brian Albert's house that night. Heather Maxson and Ryan Nagel would have told him that they arrived at 34 Fairview shortly after Karen and John pulled up behind them, and they would have told Michael Proctor, at least Heather would have told Michael Proctor, that when she left 10 minutes later, she drove past the SUV and observed Karen Reed in the driver's side, dome light on, passenger seat empty. So where was John? We could all say it together if you could talk with me. He was in the house.
Killed by an SUV.
Michael Proctor.
That's one thing that he did. It kind of drove me nuts. He goes, say it with me. He works really hard throughout to make it seem like if you convict Karen Reed, that you're siding with Michael Proctor, that you're siding against science, that you're siding against physics.
Yeah.
And that the only justice that can be served is by agreeing with him. And he does this, like, say it with me. It's actually pretty sinister the way that he's trying to co-opt the minds of the jury, because if he could have actually made them say it out loud, that would have had a profound psychological impact on it. It's something that you do when you're negotiating with people, when you're crisis negotiating, hostage negotiating. If you can get them to admit out loud that they agree with a point that you're making, no matter how subtle it is, it goes a long way towards building that influence with them. And I think that's what he was doing here. They couldn't speak out loud to say it meant he was inside the house, but they all probably said it in their heads. And I think that that's a very, very deliberate move. Drew, do you have any thoughts on that in terms of how he might be trying to influence them with a move like that?
It's there's a guy named Chase Hughes. He's brilliant. As a matter of fact, he's a like a psyops kind of guy. I'm going to do a whole like episode on what defense attorneys use as far as psyops are concerned. But this is a little mini tactic. I don't even know if he's doing it consciously. I have the feeling he is, but it's like a neurocognitive trigger. So what he's saying is, Chase Hughes has this FATE model, which is focus, authority, tribe, and emotion. FATE. So it goes to your primal thoughts, your primal, like your it's how Cesar Millan, when Cesar Millan does that to train dogs, he's doing the focus. His authority is that he's the pack leader. The tribe, he's trying to get everybody together, and then he gives them some kind of emotional reward in the form of praise or whatever. This is the same thing Alan Jackson just did. He grabbed their focus. He has the authority because he used the silence, because he has the power of speech. He's the only one that can speak right now. He made it tribal by telling everyone specifically, say it with me. And what he said was an emotional response. It was like, it's going to evoke emotion when you say it with him. And I guarantee in your mind, because I think I did it, in your mind as a juror, you're going to say it with him. You're going to follow along. So, or at the very minimum, you're going to be like, yeah, I don't know what we're about to say here.
It's some trickery though, right? Like you're actualizing or manifesting it, or all of a sudden he's incepting his thoughts or his belief inside your head. You're actually, as his external dialogue is going on, it becomes your internal monologue. It's like a little Jedi mind trick.
Mini Wolverine is walking around my head.
Mini Wolverine
in a
going
nice
around.
suit.
These are not the droids you're looking for. Bullshit right here. I don't like it.
In his bone claws.
Drew, should we call it here?
Yeah, let's call it here, and let's continue this. I really, there's some stuff I want to do with defense attorneys in general. Like I want to do a show about. I also want to get to Hank Brennan's closing argument. I think we can do the same thing with his, but I think we should also continue and finish out this closing argument. I think
to be fair, that if you wanted to do this in a fair way and to prevent tricks like this, Brennan and Jackson should have been forced to give their closing arguments at the same time.
Yeah.
Shouting, getting louder.
Grab-assing like they were doing in the waterfall.
They should have just said, listen, we're gonna fuck around like in that video, and whichever one of us is the stronger man wins.
Or what if they like fencing? Like something like fencing, or you know what I mean? Like one-on-one basketball.
Sport. That would have been a civilized way of doing it. Or shirts and skins with a little bit of beepo. I guess
maybe
St. Jackson
forward.
without a shirt on probably wouldn't hurt the show's ratings.
Hank Brennan has an intense outside shot. There's no question in my mind.
Yeah. But which man plays without a conscience? All right, folks, if you want to be a part of this show, dial 848-COMM 911. That's 848-266-6911. You can be part of the show by leaving us a voicemail. We love voicemails that ask us questions about the show. So if you call with a lot of nonsense or you're just calling making noise, you're probably not going to make the cut. But we always appreciate it when we get a great voicemail. If you're interested in watching more of our Karen Read content, look, we've got tons of it right here. We got a whole playlist of great Karen Read content. If you want to catch up on every single thing that's happened, all the reasons why Drew's mad and all the reasons why Alan Jackson is wrong, or all the reasons that he's right or whatever, make sure you're checking out all these videos. Drew, it's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.